Ethan and Marcus Vale seemed untouchable, ruling their suburban streets with fear, money, and ruthless ambition. But behind the doors of their auto shop, a criminal empire was spiraling toward a violent and shocking downfall that no one saw coming. It began in a quiet suburb that seemed too peaceful to hide anything dangerous. Streets lined with freshly painted houses and neatly trimmed lawns gave the appearance of safety, but behind the closed doors of one particular home, a dangerous operation was quietly thriving. Ethan and Marcus Vale, two brothers who looked ordinary to anyone passing by, had built a drug network that extended far beyond what the neighborhood could imagine. Their business was disguised as a small auto repair shop, complete with grease-stained uniforms, a few old cars in the parking lot, and the constant hum of machinery. On the surface, it seemed like a normal local business, but the shop was the center of an empire moving pills and powders through carefully hidden compartments in car tires, engines, and even dashboards. The brothers' lives were built on precision, secrecy, and intimidation. Ethan, the older of the two, was meticulous. He kept detailed records, constantly counted money, and monitored every delivery. Marcus, on the other hand, thrived on bold moves and risky schemes. He was the face of the operation during parties and gatherings, flaunting wealth, luxury cars, and designer clothes to impress allies and scare rivals. Together, they created an illusion of success that masked a deep and growing paranoia. For years, their plan worked perfectly. The neighbors rarely questioned the constant comings and goings, the expensive cars parked out front, or the lavish parties that sometimes spilled into the night. People assumed the brothers were just successful businessmen, and the auto shop was simply part of their apparent prosperity. However, cracks began to form beneath the surface. Rumors started circulating about the origins of their drugs. The supply chain was traced back to dangerous contacts, people who were violent and unforgiving. While the brothers had managed to avoid trouble for years, the slightest misstep now had the potential to ruin everything they had built. The fear of betrayal began to gnaw at Ethan, who spent long nights scanning license plates, checking for unfamiliar faces, and questioning even his most loyal associates. Marcus, though less cautious, began to notice tension in his own crew. Some members whispered about stolen money, unpaid debts, and alliances shifting behind their backs. The brothers' lavish lifestyle attracted attention, too. Expensive cars, extravagant parties, and piles of cash made them targets. While the Vale brothers enjoyed the thrill of power, they underestimated the growing interest from law enforcement and rival criminals alike. Their empire, once untouchable, now had a visible target on it. Despite this, the brothers pressed on, believing that their careful planning and ruthless enforcement of loyalty would protect them. Every delivery, every meeting, and every transaction was executed with precision. Yet each success brought them closer to a confrontation they were unprepared for. The quiet suburb, with its white fences and manicured lawns, hid a secret world of crime and danger. Ethan and Marcus Vale had turned a seemingly ordinary auto repair shop into the headquarters of a criminal empire. But even the most carefully hidden secrets cannot remain concealed forever. The foundation of their success rested on control, intimidation, and secrecy, and as the shadows around them grew, so did the inevitability of their downfall. Their story was only beginning, and the events that followed would reveal just how fragile power built on fear and greed could be. The first sign that the Vale brothers' carefully constructed world was beginning to unravel came quietly, almost imperceptibly. A small-time dealer who worked with Ethan and Marcus vanished without a trace after what seemed like a routine delivery. His car was discovered abandoned and burned on the outskirts of town, and investigators found traces of the same drugs that had made the brothers notorious. It was a warning, subtle but unmistakable, that their operations were being noticed by someone who had the power and willingness to act. The local police, initially slow to respond, began paying closer attention to the auto repair shop that had always seemed like a legitimate business. Unmarked vehicles appeared on nearby streets, and hidden cameras were installed to track the comings and goings of employees and visitors. The Vale brothers, immersed in their world of parties, money, and power, remained unaware that their every move was being monitored. As law enforcement gathered evidence, cracks began forming within the brothers' inner circle. Cole, one of their most trusted associates, had grown tired of Marcus's reckless decisions and Ethan's relentless control. When federal agents approached him with a deal, freedom in exchange for information, he hesitated only briefly before agreeing. What he provided to investigators went far beyond mere gossip. Cole delivered detailed information about delivery schedules, stash locations, and the elaborate network of money laundering the brothers had established. Every route used to move drugs across state lines, every secret account, every shell company created to hide illicit profits was meticulously mapped. Suddenly, what had appeared to be a local operation now revealed its far-reaching scope, and authorities escalated the investigation to the federal level. Inside the Vale organization, the pressure was mounting. Ethan's paranoia grew as he noticed subtle changes in behavior among his employees. Minor mistakes, usually ignored or punished quickly, began to concern him more than ever. He conducted unexpected inspections of vehicles, scrutinized shipments, and insisted on personally verifying deliveries. Marcus, meanwhile, dismissed concerns with arrogance, believing that their wealth and influence made them untouchable. But the stress of constant surveillance and fear of betrayal began to strain their relationship, and the once unshakable bond between the brothers started to fray. Meanwhile, authorities were uncovering evidence that connected the Vale brothers to a string of violent incidents that had long been whispered about in the criminal underground. Rival dealers, former associates, and even street-level operatives all painted a picture of a ruthless operation willing to use intimidation and violence to protect its interests. Investigators compiled reports, intercepted communications, and tracked financial records, creating an increasingly complete portrait of the empire the brothers had built. The quiet neighborhood, once a shield of anonymity, no longer offered protection. Neighbors who had assumed the brothers were just successful businessmen began noticing strange behaviors, mysterious visitors, and unusual activity late at night. Every layer of secrecy that Ethan and Marcus had relied on was slowly being peeled back, exposing them to risks they had ignored for too long. The network of power and control that had made them feel untouchable was now the very thing that placed them under intense scrutiny, and the Vale brothers had no idea that their carefully managed world was teetering on the brink of collapse. As the investigation intensified, the Vale brothers found themselves in a state of growing unease. Ethan's paranoia had reached a fever pitch. Every unfamiliar face in the neighborhood, every car that lingered too long, seemed like a threat. He began conducting late-night surveillance of his own property, using mirrors and cameras to catch anyone who might be watching. Marcus, on the other hand, grew reckless. He continued flaunting wealth at parties and in public, convinced that no one could touch them. Their contrasting approaches, once a source of balance, now created tension that made the brothers vulnerable. The empire they had built on fear and secrecy was beginning to crumble from within. The first serious confrontation came unexpectedly. A rival gang, seeking revenge for a betrayal years earlier, had discovered the location of one of the Vale brothers' safe houses. That night, Ethan and Marcus had arranged to move a large shipment of drugs across state lines, unaware that the rival gang was already waiting. As the night grew darker, gunfire shattered the quiet streets of the suburb. The brothers had always relied on their reputation and resources to intimidate threats, but this time they were outmatched. Marcus was hit early in the raid, bleeding and unable to move, while Ethan barely escaped through a back alley, heart racing and mind calculating the next steps. By morning, the once quiet streets were littered with signs of chaos, spent shell casings, overturned vehicles, and neighbors too shocked to speak. The aftermath of the raid brought attention from multiple law enforcement agencies. News outlets quickly picked up the story, broadcasting images of the crime scene and highlighting the supposed untouchability of the Vale brothers. For the first time, their world of luxury and dominance was publicly scrutinized. Ethan, now on the run, moved through a series of motels, constantly checking mirrors, tracking digital footprints, and relying on contacts he had once controlled. Marcus, despite his injuries, was forced to confront the reality that their power could not protect him indefinitely. Meanwhile, inside their organization, loyalty had begun to erode. Associates who once feared the brothers started talking to law enforcement, hoping to reduce their own exposure. Cole, who had already provided critical information, remained in contact with authorities, giving them insight into the brothers' next moves. Each tip brought investigators closer, narrowing the space in which Ethan and Marcus could operate. Every corner they turned seemed to reveal another threat, another risk that could not be controlled. Even as the brothers attempted to regroup, their confidence had waned. Ethan's meticulous planning clashed with Marcus's desperate attempts to maintain control, creating confusion and mistakes. Each decision, whether moving cash, relocating drugs, or seeking medical care for Marcus, exposed them further. The empire that once seemed invincible was now collapsing under pressure from rivals, betrayal, and the law. Every step taken to protect themselves only drew them closer to the inevitable capture that loomed just over the horizon. The Vale brothers had underestimated the combination of human intelligence, technology, and the tenacity of those seeking justice. The events of that fateful night revealed the fragility of their power, proving that even the most carefully hidden criminal empire could not withstand relentless scrutiny and the consequences of past mistakes. Ethan's life on the run was a constant game of cat and mouse. He moved from motel to motel, each stay lasting only a night or two before he felt the walls closing in. Every transaction, every cash withdrawal, every phone call became a potential trap. Surveillance teams tracked his movements meticulously, piecing together patterns from security cameras, license plate readers, and even digital footprints left behind by seemingly harmless online searches. One small mistake, a single ATM withdrawal captured on camera, gave authorities the clue they needed to tighten the noose. Each day brought him closer to capture, and every decision weighed heavily on his mind as he realized how exposed he had become. Marcus, still recovering from the gunshot wound sustained during the raid, was in hiding under a false identity. He had assumed that injuries and a low profile would protect him, but fate was not on his side. A nurse in the hospital, noticing the resemblance to a widely circulated wanted poster, alerted the authorities. Within hours, Marcus was apprehended, his escape cut short before he could even begin to consider a plan. The brothers, once untouchable, were now separated and under strict control, each isolated from the other and stripped of their ability to influence the outside world. The arrests sent shockwaves through their criminal network. Associates who had once feared Ethan and Marcus began cooperating with authorities, hoping to reduce their own exposure. Federal investigators used this intelligence to uncover hidden stashes of cash, drugs, and weapons. Each discovery added weight to the case against the brothers, creating a detailed record of the scale and reach of their operations. Every hidden warehouse, every secret account, and every documented delivery told a story of ruthless ambition and careful planning, making it impossible for the brothers to deny responsibility. While in custody, Ethan and Marcus maintained a cold, calculating silence, each hoping to deflect blame onto the other. Yet their efforts were futile. The evidence collected, from Cole's recordings to financial transactions, intercepted communications, and physical contraband, painted a clear picture of their criminal enterprise. Prosecutors assembled a case that left little room for doubt, exposing the extent to which the Vale brothers had manipulated, intimidated, and destroyed the lives of countless people to protect their empire. Outside the courtroom, the community began to grasp the magnitude of the brothers' operations. Neighbors who had once seen Ethan and Marcus as ordinary local businessmen now understood the danger that had lurked behind the doors of the auto shop. The quiet suburb, with its neatly maintained streets and harmless appearances, had been the stage for one of the most ruthless and calculated criminal enterprises in the region. Investigators documented not only the financial crimes and drug operations, but also the violence, intimidation, and betrayal that defined the Vale brothers' rise to power. The realization that their freedom and power were gone set in slowly for Ethan and Marcus. Their empire, built over years of careful planning, manipulation, and intimidation, had been dismantled in a matter of months. Every connection they had trusted, every tactic they had relied upon, had been turned against them. The investigation, relentless and precise, had exposed the fragility of even the most seemingly invincible criminal networks. In the end, the brothers were left to confront the consequences of their actions, understanding for the first time that no amount of wealth, fear, or cunning could shield them from justice. The trial of Ethan and Marcus Vale became one of the most closely followed criminal cases in the region. Courtrooms were packed with spectators, reporters, and law enforcement officials, all eager to witness the downfall of two men who had once seemed untouchable. The prosecution presented evidence in a meticulous and relentless fashion, painting a vivid picture of the brothers' criminal empire. Every detail was laid bare, the financial records showing millions laundered through shell companies, the maps of distribution networks spanning multiple states, the hidden warehouses stocked with drugs and weapons, and the recordings of conversations that revealed both their ruthlessness and their arrogance. Each piece of evidence added weight to a case that left little room for doubt, exposing the full scope of the destruction caused by their actions. The courtroom atmosphere was tense. Observers were struck by the contrast between the brothers' earlier confidence and the quiet, restrained demeanor they now displayed. Ethan sat rigid, eyes scanning the room, but showing no sign of defiance, while Marcus appeared subdued, his injuries and months of confinement evident in his posture. There was no bravado left, no attempt to charm or manipulate the system that had finally caught up with them. The evidence spoke louder than any words they could offer, and it painted a picture of men who had allowed greed, pride, and a hunger for control to dictate their lives. Witness after witness described the fear and chaos that had followed in the wake of the brothers' operations. Former associates recounted moments of intimidation, threats, and violence, while law enforcement officials outlined the painstaking investigation that had taken years to complete. The narrative revealed not just criminal activity, but the human toll of their empire, lives disrupted, families harmed, and communities left scarred by the reach of their influence. With each testimony, the reality of the Vale brothers' crimes became clearer, leaving the courtroom in a state of quiet disbelief at the extent of the damage they had caused. When the verdict was finally announced, the weight of justice settled heavily over the courtroom. Guilty on every charge, Ethan and Marcus Vale faced decades behind bars. The sentence marked the definitive end of an empire that had once seemed impenetrable. For the first time, the brothers confronted the consequences of their actions in full, stripped of wealth, power, and influence. Their careful planning, their intimidation tactics, and their secrecy had all failed to protect them from the eventual reach of justice. Years later, the story of Ethan and Marcus Vale serves as a cautionary tale. The auto shop where their empire began now sits abandoned, a silent reminder of the dangers of unchecked ambition and criminal enterprise. Streets once quietly overlooked by neighbors now carry the memory of the chaos and fear that the brothers inflicted. The Vale brothers, who once ruled with intimidation and skill, now exist only in court records, news archives, and the memory of those who were affected by their crimes. Their downfall demonstrates that even the most calculated and ruthless individuals are not immune to the consequences of their actions, and that eventually justice finds its way to those who believe they are beyond it.